Fiachra MacFiach, Ireland's greatest living genius, is living in London with Francis, his brother, and Philomena, his very heavily pregnant sister-in-law. Francis was rounding off his working day with an evening shift at Ward's Irish House. Fact. Philomena was heavy with child. Fact. I was pregnant with the muse. Fact. Francis was out. I was in. Philomena was about to give birth. Fact, fact, fact. You begin to see the broad picture. Because of my brother's inability to control his own affairs, I had been cast in the role of in loco husbandis. Philomena decided her time had come. The normal rules of civility, not her strong suit in the best of circumstances, deserted her in their entirety at this juncture. She burst into my room. "Get me," she demanded, "to the hospital. I'm dilating." In artistic terms, so was I. But consideration for others is not Philomena's strong suit, so I held my tongue. "Can you drive?" she said. I was about to explain my feelings about driving under the influence of genius, but she cut across my opening word. "Then call a taxi, please." This, at least, is the Doctor for Schools version. Her actual words were muscular and forthright, but by this stage I'd had enough. "The hospital," I said, "is within easy walking distance. It's a beautiful night. Let's go." And, grabbing hold of my notebook and a couple of spare pens, I marched on ahead. Philomena followed. She had no choice, actually, as I'm damned willful when the mood takes me. And the mood was certainly taking me here. We hardly spoke en route. To be brutally frank, I felt a bit hard done by. My mind was full of conflicting thoughts and images. My muse, the brusque response of Ward's Irish House to Francis's request for prenatal paid leave. The fact that I was wrong about the proximity of the hospital and the weather. It rained all the long, long way. Now, I am not, I think, a difficult man to deal with. My needs are simple, my expectations few. But I hope I am never forced to write another poem in a hospital. Medical staff, be they doctors, nurses, or people with mops, seem congenitally incapable of remaining silent or standing still. Hither and thither they rush, without any apparent thought for others. I was, as I say, heavily pregnant with the muse, and true, I gave birth to a masterpiece that night, but I did so in spite of the most appalling intrusions. My previous experiences of waiting rooms have taught me that they are nothing but breeding grounds for the worst type of bore. So I accepted the nurse's offer of accompanying Philomena to the birth room. She seemed unwilling to engage in banter. We hadn't spoken since leaving the house, and this suited my purposes admirably. I laid my journal and notebook down at the end of the bed and set to work with a will. I was making excellent progress when Philomena began uttering the most extraordinary noises and calling loudly for her mother, who was in Birkenhead at the time. I managed to ignore this for a good while, confining myself to the odd shh. Matters took a turn for the worse, however, when the nurse started to fuss about the room, talking to Philomena in a very loud voice, although Philomena by this time seemed in no fit state for conversation. Then the nurse, a large girl from Galway, turned her attention to me. "It might be worth considering an epidural," she said. I must say I found this vying for custom distasteful in the extreme. Besides, I wasn't there to be tampered with. So I politely, if a trifle frostily, declined. Work at this stage was achieved under the most extreme duress. Philomena began to direct a stream of abuse at me that was totally uncalled for. She then broadcast a series of personal details for anyone who cared to listen. I was a pompous, insufferable, prickish bore. I was, I can hardly bear to write it down, a fifth-rate scribbler of verse with delusions of mediocrity. I had a mole on my left buttock. Naturally enough, I was absolutely furious. "Now look here," I said, intending to put her straight on the verse business. But at this point, the nurse came back and cut across my speech. "Ah, sure, they're all like that with the old husband," she said. "It's a sure sign the baby's on its way." "Damn your impertinence, woman!" I replied testily. "I am not her husband." This, for some reason, struck her as having humorous intent. "That's a good one, all right," she chortled, her large Galwegian frame rippling with mirth. As soon as she had left the room, I gave Philomena a stern lecture on her obvious lack of training in literary criticism. But she started screaming that it was coming, and it was reminding of what I was doing there in the first place. I took my chair over to the corner of the room and was delighted to discover that she was right. Within hours, I had produced, without fuss or personal abuse directed at a single innocent third party, what may well stand as my finest achievement to date. I am referring, of course, to Yet Further Lines for Seamus Heaney. I went home shortly afterwards and slept for 12 full hours, exhausted by my miraculous fecundity.